I'm here today with Dr. Yanis Varoufakis, soon to be a visiting professor at the Lyndon Baines Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. We're here to talk about his new book, The Global Minotaur, which is put out by Zed Books in their Economic Controversy series, I understand, which you can buy on Amazon or in many bookstores around the country. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rob.
Tell me, what is a global minotaur?
It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor with which I decided to try to tell my story about what went wrong in 2008 and why is the world economy finding it so hard to rediscover its poise after that debacle in 2008. It's a metaphor which, the purpose of which was to capture something quite extraordinary that happened after the end of Bretton Woods in 1971. In 1944, as we all know, under the guidance of people like White and
Harry Dexter White
and John Maynard Keynes, the world tried to put in place a global economic system which featured effectively a common currency, more or less a fixed exchange regime, without the pitfalls of the gold standard that had preceded and which crashed and burned in 1929 with awful, hideous repercussions. And that the bit that was missing from the gold standard and which was put in place under Bretton Woods is what I call very simply a surplus recycling mechanism. The idea that just like in the United States, you have a common currency, the dollar, but you've got a very effective system, or at least variably effective and at times very effective system of recycling surpluses within the United States.
Across the states and regions.
So if you do this within the United States, you do it within Germany, you do it within Britain, you do it within every currency union. Okay? You need to do it within the global system if you have a fixed exchange rate regime like you had
so that the adjustment of the exchange rate doesn't, what you might call, dampen the shocks, the transfers dampen the shocks.
It's a shock absorbing system.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a system that ensures that when there is a recession, you don't have the catastrophe that you had in 1929 to 1932, with the burden of adjustment being placed on the deficit countries and regions which cannot, they cannot actually hold that kind of burden. And so in 1944, it was clear the United States was very keen to recycle its own surpluses. It happened in various different ways. The Marshall Plan is just one example, but just one of many different examples.
Foreign direct investments and...
Indeed. So American surpluses were being exported primarily to Europe and to Japan, creating the demand for American surpluses to be regenerated, to be reproduced. Now that first phase of the post-war era came to an end for a very simple reason. America became a deficit country by the mid-60s, let's say.
Yeah.
So that system entered into a period, quite prolonged period, about a decade of a crisis, which came to a head in 1971 with the dismantling of that
when
system.
The U.S. went off gold.
But what was remarkable after 71 is that the United States, I don't know to what extent it was conscious, even though Paul Volcker has written a beautiful paper in 1971 foreshadowing that when he was working for Henry Kissinger, before Henry Kissinger moved to the State Department. What happened was the United States decided that they will maintain their hegemonic position by recycling other people's surpluses.
So they became the deficit country.
So the American twin deficit, rather than being an accident, rather than being some sign of failure, was, in my estimation, this is what the story I'm telling in the book, it was a very important tool for maintaining world aggregate demand.
They became a magnet as the market of last resort.
Exactly. The American deficit was simply a vacuum cleaner sucking into the United States the net exports of Germany, of Japan, later of China, of the oil exporting countries. And that deficit had to keep growing as long as the world economy was growing. The question is, how do you finance this? Well, the answer almost spontaneously emerged. the success of American administrations, of successive American administrations, to squeeze labor costs within the United States, to squeeze inflation below that of its competitors. The Walmart and Wall Street model of economic growth.
Foreign direct investment, goods coming into
Effectively
America.
what happened, the surpluses that were being generated in Germany, in Japan, and later in China, flowed back like two huge tsunamis over the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, ending up in Wall Street, refinancing those. So the circle actually closed.
They used to say our comparative advantage is bonds.
Indeed, indeed. Now, this was a surplus recycling mechanism that worked, yet it had to keep becoming more and more unstable in order to keep working. On the back
It's not unlike the Triffin dilemma of years
right.
past, which was eventually people will hold a large stock of reserves
Exactly.
that it can't be credible.